Joining me now to talk about some of them is Robert Moran. He's a partner at Brunswick Group, a public opinion and market research company. Jenifer Sarver is joining us from Austin, Texas. She's the principal at Sarver Strategies and a former Commerce Department official. And Jenifer, why don't I start with you, because your state is home to a race that no one really thought would be competitive. Initially, Texas, a red state, you have an incumbent facing a challenger that most of the state had never even heard of before he challenged Senator Ted Cruz. Talk to me about this race and also what you'll be watching for this evening.
Yeah, thanks, Mike, for having me on. I think two big things I'm really focused on tonight. One of them is voter turnout. Here in Texas, we've already surpassed 2014 turnout when it comes to our early voting. More people are participating and are energized, and that's exciting. I think we have President Trump to thank for that on both sides of the aisle, frankly. You're talking about the Senate race, of course, between Beto O'Rourke and Senator Ted Cruz. I think Beto has done an amazing job of energizing people throughout the state, and that's a good thing for our democracy. I'm a Republican. I believe in conservative philosophy of governing, but I also want to make sure that we have competitive races where we can fight about ideas. And what Beto O'Rourke has done is energize people to come out and vote and challenge Republicans to talk about our ideas. And when we're talking about ideas and not tearing each other down, that's a good thing for democracy. Another story I'm really interested in following is how many women are running for office. In Texas, we haven't elected a woman to Congress since 1996. Tonight, we'll elect at least 2 more women to Congress. And that's a good thing when we have more women represented. On the bad side of that equation, of course, is that none of them are Republicans. So my party has to do more to get more women involved in the process and more women running for office.
Robert, I want to get your thoughts. First, Texas, this Senate race, it's an interesting race. And initially, nobody really even knew who this guy was. He went to all the counties. I mean, he's been kind of a darling of the left. People have fallen in love with his campaign. It's an interesting race, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, he's received a ton of free media from the media. He is photogenic and has made the race tight. I think Ted Cruz is not the most likable politician, and he capitalized on that. But Texas is a red state, at least for now. I think it's really hard to turn that state blue. We'll see. Almost all the polling has had Cruz comfortably ahead now for a while. But we shall see. I mean, I think what happened here is the president and his team and the NRCC and the NRSC sort of panicked in October-ish timeframe, realized this thing could spin out of control, and then they went hard rhetorically to messaging that would turn their base out as a way to save this election. We'll see if that was effective or not.
She mentioned women. We've already seen one woman who was a challenger, defeating Barbara Comstock in Virginia in one of the House races. So they picked up Democrats have picked up a seat there. We're seeing Amy McGrath running a pretty good race in Kentucky. Talk to me about the women on the ballot this time around.
Wow. Well, it is a sea change and a historic moment. In any American election, about 52 to 53% of the voters are women. So a majority of the voters in almost any U.S. election are women. You have a ton of first-time congressional candidates who are women, and that will trickle through our process for years to come as those folks then run for Senate, et cetera. But I would like to go back to the fact that when Mitt Romney lost to Barack Obama, the RNC commissioned this huge study to figure out what the party should do to try to expand its base and to be a consequential national party. And a lot of it was appealing to minorities, appealing to women, moderating some stances, focusing on growth and jobs, the economy, et cetera. And if you look at the rhetoric, almost none of what they said in that document have they actually done this time out. And I think that's a challenge for them, and we'll see. But right now, it looks like Democrats get the House with some margin, maybe not comfortable, and Republicans hold on to the Senate.
Jenifer, let me ask you about, you know, you're in Texas, it's a border state, so is Arizona, where we're also seeing a very competitive race, and Frank talking about, you know, the caravan, that sort of thing. Is immigration going to play a role in the voting there and in Texas?
Immigration always plays a role in voting in Texas. It remains one of the top issues for voters, whether we're talking about a caravan or not. We share 1,200 miles of border with Texas. I grew up 15 minutes from Mexico, so it's an issue near and dear to my heart. I think the mistake that most people make when they think about talking about the border is that everybody who's Hispanic is against immigration reform and against strong borders. The reality is we need a comprehensive solution. We know that we need workers in our country. We know there are jobs that Americans won't do, but we need people to come here legally and lawfully lawfully and know who's in our country. I think there's a way to do that with compassion and with our economic interests in mind. I disagreed vehemently with the president's rhetoric on this issue. I agree that we've thrown out that playbook that was just talked about from the last election, and we need to bring that back and understand how, as Republicans, we can talk about law and order, we can talk about our economy, we can talk about protecting Americans without denigrating people and without dehumanizing people.
Robert, I know that you and I talked a little bit about exit polling, and you said you don't put a lot of stock in it. But it's interesting. One of the questions was, how do you feel the economy is going? And the numbers were very high. What direction is the country going in? A lot of them very negative. That doesn't seem like it should square. It's been interesting. That one aspect of the exit polling, I think, has been pretty interesting.
So, a couple things. First, exit polls have been terrible for a very long time. When I started out in the business forever ago, the exit polls were bad because the sample sizes were too small. They're asking people as they're rushing out of polling places, and a lot of people didn't want to answer. And by the way, a lot of Republicans didn't want to answer. So the polling at the exit polls, not the regular polls, but the exit polls are generally bad, and they're actually back-weighted to the results at the end, by the way. Now, with absentee and early voting, that makes it even harder to do. Now, to specifically talk about the economy, real quick, this is an unforced error by Republicans. If you tell me that Republicans have the White House, the Senate, and the House, and they have a great economy at 3.7% unemployment, they should be winning tonight. They should be winning. And that they're not tells you something. And finally, the right direction, wrong track. You could say that the economy is going very well, but that the country is off on the wrong track because of the tone or because of sort of morality or any of these other things, the environment. And we've seen that for a long time. The economy, views of the economy are not necessarily consistent with right direction, wrong track.
Jennifer, let me ask you about groups of voters. There's always this big focus. A lot of people are saying it's not a blue wave, it's a pink wave. We're going to see a lot of women coming out and voting, millennials, Hispanics, African Americans. Which group do you think is going to be out in force today, and which one should we keep our eyes on?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of groups that I'm interested in. I'm always cautious not to treat any group of people as a monolith. I hate being painted with one brush because I'm a woman, because I'm a Republican. But I am interested in looking what women do. We know that women and white suburban voters were hugely important to Trump's victory in 2016. What do they do tonight? Have they changed their tone? They wanted to give the president a chance because he was going to be a disruptor in chief, do things differently, break the gridlock in Washington, and has it been worth it? I think that's an interesting question to look at. I'm also really fascinated by young voters. They traditionally get really excited and then don't show up. However, we've seen in some of the early voting, and definitely here in Travis County, where Austin is located, we have more registered young voters than ever before. That's a great thing because that's great for democracy and important for our future. What I'm concerned about is who they're voting for. And the last Pew report showed that only 12% of young people and 12% of millennials register as conservatives or value conservative values. And so what the Republican Party has to do, if it's going to be around in 20 years from now, is reach out to those young voters and talk to them about liberty and freedom and economic opportunity and all of the things that I believe in, that really the true Republican Party and the Republican Party of the Reagan era believed in, and regain those voters and talk about our optimism and hope for the future. And unless we do that, we're going to lose future generations. So I think young voters and women are the ones that I'm looking at tonight.
And Robert, I know you and I have talked about this. You always say the millennials, everybody talks about them, but they sure disappoint. Do you think this year will be different?
Well, the old joke in American politics was that what do you call a campaign that depends on young people to win? A loser, right? That was the old joke. That's not true anymore. I think millennials are turning out in very large numbers, as we've seen. I think that helps Democrats tonight. Look, I think big picture, what you're going to see tonight is that Democrats have a geography problem, and you're seeing that in Senate races, right? Their voters are clumped in parts of the country, but not spread across. So Democrats have a geography problem. Republicans, they have a demography problem. And unless they fix that demography problem with younger voters, the youngest generation, with Latinos, and they're not a monolith, but generally speaking with Latinos, et cetera, then they're not going to be around as a party. It's a big tent country. You have to appeal to a very wide spectrum of people.
Well, I want to thank Robert and Jennifer for your insights. Really appreciate it. It's going to be an interesting evening. I imagine it might be a long one, too.
It'll be a long evening.